Welcome to the Content Podcast, Conversations with Silicon Valley's Creatives. I'm Daniel Garcia, your host and the cultivator of Content Magazine, published by SV Creates. This episode of the Content Magazine podcast is brought to you by Bonfire, a Silicon Valley digital agency building elevated websites for ambitious brands. Find out more about Bonfire at bonfire.com.
Hello.
Today we talk to Suzanne St. John Crane. She's the Chief Executive Officer for American Leadership Forum, Silicon Valley. Hey, Suzanne, this is Daniel. How are you doing?
Hey, Daniel. I'm good. How are you?
I am great. I am excited to talk to you. I haven't seen you. Actually, I did see you very briefly at the San Jose Jazz Fest this summer.
That's right.
But just for a brief moment. But otherwise, I haven't seen you in months.
Long time.
A year.
Oh my gosh, right?
Feels
like
that's
forever.
That's been kind of the case with all of us.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to talk to you. I'm excited to talk to you about the backstory even of how you became the Chief Executive Officer for American Leadership Forum, and talk to you about a leadership forum and what that's all about. But even before I get there, I just want our audience to know just the other creative side of Suzanne St. John Crane, who is incredible. And that is you and your musical talents in singing that you do. I kind of want to start there, and then we'll kind of go through your whole life, and then we'll end up with today.
Wow. How long is this interview?
Yeah, it's 5 minutes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So we have to talk really fast. Well, everybody will play this on a time and a half anyways, you know.
Yeah, right.
But so now, okay, so you're a singer. You have a great voice, and you and your husband have a band called Pearl Alley, and your husband Dave. But for you, when did you kind of find out that you had a singing voice and you started doing that?
Well, that's an interesting story. I was 3 years old, and my mom took me out to the garage because, the acoustics are great in the garage, right? And I was just this showy little kid, right? And I thought, oh, I'm getting everybody's attention singing. And so I went out into the garage and I sang Delta Dawn.
Okay.
What's that flower you have on? I mean, this total 70s, Helen Reddy song. And it's funny, I still have a tape recording of that because my mom taped it on a cassette. And you just hear me like pumping out this song with all this attitude. And you hear my mom chuckling in the background. It's hysterical. And so I seemed to be getting attention as a kid, and I sure enjoyed singing, right? And then, my parents were very Catholic, and I grew up in the Catholic Church. And so singing really, it was what I did and what I loved about Mass, is being able to sing. And so when I was in 8th grade, I was asked to lead the music at church. And, I would actually sneak into church, right, during the week and just sing because, again, the acoustics were just incredible. So I would just belt out Amazing Grace or just different songs. And it was just beautiful to me. And it was beautiful to be able to move people with your voice, like to see people get emotional or laugh or smile or dance. And so, I was afraid a little bit of singing imperfectly. I think that was part of my perfectionism that held me back from just going for it in terms of a career. But I did end up, singing in weddings and this and that. And then as I got older, it was after my mom died when I was 24 that I kind of had a, no pun intended, come to Jesus moment with myself about like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with this? You battle with wanting to sing, but not singing perfectly, not being afraid to be in a band and just all this. Anyway, I finally just went for it. And I did some open mics. I went to JJ's in Santa Clara in my 20s. And that's where I met John Lee Hooker's family. And so I ended up in a band with Archie Lee Hooker for a while. And really was baptized in the blues, and got to practice at John Lee's house and met him, several times. And, I'll never.
So were you touring too? Were you like touring with the band and stuff?
Oh, no. I mean, just local, right? So we were gigging local but it looked like something might take off. It never did, and I think that it's funny. I think I never wanted to give all of myself to one thing. I had too many interests, and I still do. And I don't know, you could call that a problem. I call it a gift, right? I think it's
totally
great to have a lot of different different interests or just passions around. I'm a writer. I'm a singer. I love to use my voice to inspire. Right. So
Yeah.
anyway, I did not tour, but I got to have this incredible experience, right, of just being in John Lee Hooker's presence. And my husband and I then met, a few years later at a dive bar. It's not a very glamorous story, but
Which bar was it? Was it here in town, or
it
was
was
it
in, oh, it's
Boswell's?
worse. It's so bad. No, it was
What?
it's not there anymore. It's in Aptos. It's called the Windjammer.
Oh,
So
it
bad.
sounds classy.
Oh, super classy,
The
man. Super.
Windjammer.
Well, his band was playing there, and his band was called the Daves because
Oh,
everybody's in the band, everybody's name is Dave in the band. And so
yeah,
I go there on a date with one of his friends, and we met. I said, "Hey, I'm a singer," and I got up and sat in with the band, and the rest is history. So we've got
yeah,
a CD, and we've been playing together a long time. Yep.
yeah. That's awesome. So then, was it? So then you were singing in church, but was the blues somewhat of in the repertoire and your palette when you were growing up too, or was that more once you kind of met, um, when you kind of got involved later?
That's a great question. No, it was not at all on my palette. I mean, seriously, as a kid, my parents were listening to Johnny Mathis and Neil Diamond.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know where it came from. Although
Yeah.
when I got to college, right, I had a professor who I did a project for that involved singing, and she's like, "You have some serious soul somewhere
Yeah.
in your."
Yeah.
And my grandmother was a singer, right? I have records that she made in the 50s,
Oh,
but
cool.
it's just incredible, right? All this vinyl that she recorded on, and I mean, it's show tunes, it's some
Yeah.
Broadway type stuff. But no, I don't know, Daniel. I mean, I think I found out when I sang in my first talent show when I was 8 years old. I sang The Rose, and I had this connection with Janis Joplin because the movie
Oh.
The Rose was loosely based on her life, and then she just kept creeping back into my life. Right.
Hmm. Yeah.
I went and saw a show of Rolling Stone covers, and I saw this one of her just kind of slumped over. This beautiful picture of her kind of slumped over with a Southern Comfort bottle in her lap, and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
this tragic, picture. And I
Yeah.
looked, and it was actually put on the cover, or it was the cover of Rolling Stone the day that it was like the episode
Oh, when
after the
she
day she
passed away.
died, right? And
Yeah.
the day that magazine came out was the day I was born. So it's
Oh,
just like
wow.
these weird, freaky kind of connections with
Connection.
her.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I at this point, I can't do a show without singing a Janis Joplin song, or else people get mad at me. So she's just
what's your
it's in there.
what's your favorite what's your favorite Janis song to do?
Well, I do Piece of My Heart. I don't do Bobby
Oh,
McGee.
yeah.
Everyone loves to hear Bobby McGee. I don't know. I just haven't
Yeah.
done that, but I love to do, actually, my husband and I now are doing, he does Voodoo Child, and then we go into her version
Oh,
of
cool.
Summertime and back to Voodoo Child, which is really
Oh,
fun.
wow.
We've got this
That's awesome.
fantasy of doing like a Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin mashup show. Maybe when I
Yeah.
retire, we'll see.
Yeah, that's cool.
My spare
Now,
time.
so you had this. Okay, so the music was kind of going on. You were doing different interests, and then you actually started working. I think it was it was like San Bernardino or some, not San Bernardino, somewhere kind of like Salinas, Monterey area, Gilroy, with
Gilroy.
community television. Gilroy, yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Hmm.
So is that where you grew up? What area did you grow up in?
I actually grew up in San Bruno. So,
In San Bruno. Okay.
Bay Area girl, lived in San Francisco, Santa Cruz, all around. Actually, Santa Cruz is where I was assistant director of the community TV station there, which I
Yeah.
swear I'm going to write a book about someday.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I was recruited to go build a station for Gilroy, Hollister, and San Juan Batista. So it was my first
That's
job
right.
as an
Yeah.
executive director, and that was a blast because I got to really build it from scratch. And I
Yeah.
was 30 at the time, and it was a great challenge for me. And that led me actually to San Jose. Right, a few years
Yeah.
later,
Yeah.
I was recruited to build CreaTV. So that was a blast as well.
Yeah, and so CreaTV pretty much you basically helped launch it. I mean, if I remember the story correctly, it was kind of like one of those things of like I think you were kind of hired and you had limited funds, and it was like start this next week-ish type of a thing, or
Right. Not quite next week. It was funny. I was just telling the story to somebody else over the weekend. Yeah, I had 90 days. We had 90 days. And I mean,
Wow.
to be fair, there was a board of conveners and people in the community working really hard to get us to the point where
Yeah.
we had a bank account and we could start, right? But there was this drop dead deadline to per a contract with the city to build it. So I had 90 days, and my first day of work was like in my living room with my personal laptop. Like we had nothing. So
Yeah.
I love that. I love building things. So it was a total challenge. I hired Justin and Lewis right away. We just,
Oh,
I
wow.
reached out to all my contractors who I knew from previous jobs. I had like 5 vendors in a space building a studio, and yeah, it
Yeah.
was it was an absolute blast.
Yeah. And then you build it to be, what it is today before you came on to ALF, which is incredible. It's an incredible feat. So have you always been, as a kid, even when you said you were singing in the garage at 3 years old with kind of like an attitude or whatever you said, have you always kind of had that kind of entrepreneurial leadership kind of skill? I mean, are you just the type of person that makes stuff happen?
It's interesting. I never thought of myself that way, ever,
Hmm.
right?
Really?
I did not see that in myself, but I was acting in that way, right? Where I would just go get something or build something or do something
Mm-hmm.
on my own, and it really wasn't until I think I got to Create TV actually, where I started to recognize that in myself, like, oh yeah, this is core to who I am. Like this is who I
Hmm.
am, right? But just
Yeah.
not having had um, mentorship or leadership or kind of somebody kind of holding my hand when I was in high school or when I was in college in a
Mm-hmm.
direction. My parents weren't available. I was just kind of following my gut and my heart, which
Yeah.
has led me, in a good direction. It's great. But it's funny you
Yeah.
asked the question that way because I just never really thought of myself that way. But I do love obviously to build things, but I also love to lift up other people's voices and stories,
Mm-hmm.
and especially those that are not mainstream, that are not known. So to use my voice and frankly to use my privilege in terms of the spaces I
Mm.
end up in to bring others along and lift other stories up and unknown truths up, to me that is so thrilling,
Yeah.
and core to I think my mission as a human here.
Yeah. What would you say then? What is your mission here as a human?
I would say my mission is to use my voice to inspire and lift up others.
Hmm.
And that comes in a variety of forms. I mean, sometimes it's singing a blues song, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And really hitting somebody's heart with music. And other times it's writing something. I mean, I don't know about you, Daniel, but I really struggle with writing. I love it, and when it's there, it just pours
Yeah.
out of you, right? And so I am working on a memoir right now just about my mom. I'd done a play about her
Hmm.
in '97 and
Yeah.
performed that in the Bay Area. And there's sort of a new evolution of that story now that I'm a mom, right? I've been a mom for 17 years. And so I'm sort of
Yeah.
integrating my own experience of motherhood with my experience with my mom.
Yeah.
And it's hard, it's intense, it's beautiful, and it's so hard to
Hmm.
be objective, right, when you're writing your own.
Sure. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I wrote this chapter about giving away her furniture. My mom passed away when I was 24. She was homeless. She's got a pretty remarkable story.
Yeah. And
And
you really weren't you kind of like a caregiver for her in the last part
yeah,
of her life too?
yeah,
Yeah.
she got
Yeah.
cancer and lung
Yeah.
cancer, as did most of my family members of that generation,
Yeah.
from smoking. And so, but I finally gave away her furniture, and it was just anyway. I
Hmm.
wrote this chapter about it. I'm like, yes, this is it. This is so good, because it was just this heart wrenching, raw kind of thing. But
Yeah.
and I've sent it to a couple of friends of mine, who's a writer as well. And he's like, yeah, this is what you need. This is how you need to write. This is what you need to do. Get to that raw
Hmm.
place and just let it pour out. But it's hard to call that up on demand.
Yeah.
So I
Well, it's
struggle with
so
writing.
yeah,
So
it's grueling, right? Because you have to pull out of yourself the things maybe you don't even want to
yes.
necessarily address or remember or yeah.
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 It's intense. I mean, I did a play about her, so it's there. I've done this before, but there's so much more now, right? 20 years
Yeah.
later to my
And
experience and what
especially
I,
being a mom. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah. And
exactly.
was it, and your mother was a nun or something like that for a while or
Yep.
something? Is that so?
That would be true. You good memory.
that,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that was really I think the beautiful part of the play that we did is that, talks. I have a video of her I captured when I was 21. I was in college, and she had just told me and my sister that she had been a nun when she was 17, and that was her life calling. And it
Wow.
just like the light bulb went on. I was like, oh my God, this is why you are the way you are. This is why I was raised a particular way. It just made so much
Hmm.
sense. So I
Yeah.
got this video, on VHS with my big, huge VHS camera. I
Yeah.
recorded her telling that story. And thank God I did, because, 3 years later, she was
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
And so it's just this
Priceless. Yeah.
beautiful story of her. Yeah, she would get up in the morning and go in the snow in Niagara Falls to the convent, and to
Hmm.
mass, and the nuns would feed her, breakfast after mass, because you had to fast before you had communion. And I mean, the whole thing, it's
Yeah.
beautiful, to hear. But yeah, and then
Yeah.
why she left, which is a whole other saga. So
Cool. Well, we'll have to wait for the book on that
yeah,
one.
yeah, exactly.
Don't give it away because that's the zinger.
Yeah,
I'm super
right,
curious,
right.
but I'll wait for the memoirs. So then, okay, so then you kind of helped and created Create TV, helped launch that, which was quite a feat, incredible. And then you you were a part of American Leadership Forum. Actually, you were a part of a class. You had been invited to be a class earlier, and then when they started the Urbanist class, was the first Urbanist class was actually I was in the same class, which is interesting.
Yes,
Um,
so
but
fun.
then you got poached, basically, right? So I want to know the dirt behind how you transitioned because you're knocking the ball out of the park with Create TV. Um, and and it's great. It's cool where it's going now and all that kind of stuff too. But but how did that come about? That you because you were actually in the urbanist class when that transition took place. I think even it was announced like one of the last meetings we had and was like, oh,
That's
now
right.
Suzanne's. I mean, I'm sure there was tons of people in the class that knew. I just didn't know. But what was kind of like the draw to move from from Create TV to American Leadership Forum?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I really believe that everything happens for a reason, and that
Yeah.
if we are mindful leaders, if we are in touch with our true purpose and our gut, doors
Hmm.
start to open and we
Yeah.
see them. We don't always see them if we're not in touch and mindful and following our true path, right? And so
Yeah.
I think, I'd come to a place at Create TV, which I loved. I was not
Yeah.
looking to go
Yeah.
anywhere. It's funny. I had some of my staff, when I told them I was leaving, they're like, we thought you were a lifer. I'm like, yeah, me too. But the the time had come, and I started to see the writing on the wall, and I started to feel like this is not the end all be all. There's
Hmm.
more for me to contribute, and more for me to learn and be stretched
Yeah.
by. And so, I didn't quite see the path in front of me, but I trusted it was the right decision. And I had a couple board members from ALF that said, hey, you should take a look at this. And I want you to think
Hmm.
about this. And that felt really good. And to me, it made sense. And not everyone
Hmm.
who looked at me thought, why are you going from television over to here? But really, what I
Hmm.
saw as an opportunity at ALF that was so exciting is to leverage the stories and the power of the people in it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And as a graduate, as an alum of ALF, I didn't feel like we had done that well yet. And so,
Hmm.
so it was exciting to me to be able to meet and know and connect 740 ALF senior fellows from 32 years and create
Yeah.
pathways for them to, uh, you know, share resources and have impact in the community and know each other and be enriched by each other. I love
Yeah.
connecting people, and I love connecting
Yeah.
resources, to people and places that need them. And so that to me was really attractive.
Yeah.
And honestly, cable television has changed so much too that I thought, okay, I've done a couple of really big things at Create TV I wanted to do. I got a major contract 10-year agreement with the city signed, which
Yeah.
took years to get done. And So it was the right time. But, when
Yeah.
you make decisions like that too, it's hard. And that first year is hard,
Yeah.
and I was grieving, I think, for that first year,
Sure.
because
Well,
not
it's hard to kind
only,
of even, yeah, even if you go to someplace good, you
yeah,
still
exactly.
are grieving the what you knew, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think when
Yeah.
you leave your comfort zone, I mean, it's a good lesson for anybody who's thinking about a transition, right? When you leave a comfort zone, a thing that you've done forever, because it wasn't just CreaTV. I'd been in television for 24 years. I mean, since I was in
Yeah.
college, right? I was doing
Yeah.
community media. So when you leave that, you need to, I think, create some space and room for yourself to grieve and have grace for yourself.
Hmm.
And it took me a while to really adjust to that and give myself that space.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm glad I did. Glad I did it.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. It's exciting. Yeah. It's fun. It's fun to have changes and new things. And yeah. So now let's, because there might be some folks out there who don't really understand exactly what American Leadership Forum is. Um, so why don't you give us kind of a quick little breakdown of what the heck is that?
Yeah, good question. So, American Leadership Forum was founded 40 years ago, actually, in Houston, and it was founded by Leon Jaworski's son. Leon Jaworski was the chief prosecutor on Watergate, interestingly enough.
Hmm.
Uh, and his son was Joe Jaworski was a prominent attorney in Houston and was really watching his father go through this crisis, right, in the middle of this moral and ethical crisis in our country. And I mean, there's no other way to say it except that Joseph Jaworski had a calling really out of that. And he left his law firm. He said, I want to start this sort of fellows or leadership experience where we get
Mm-hmm.
outside of our sector bubbles and we know each other as people so that we can create a better world around us. He just saw
Yeah.
that there was so much division and selfishness and in terms of how people were leading and the choices they were making, that he was trying to really raise human consciousness at that point and get
Yeah.
people to get leaders to uh, love each other, love each
Yeah.
other, hear each other, and make decisions differently. So, Silicon Valley chapter, there's 8 ALF chapters. Silicon Valley chapter has been around for about 32 years.
Mm-hmm.
740 senior fellows. And, the core of ALF has been this fellows program where we take 25 executives from all different walks of life
Yeah.
through a year-long experience where we go through bits of curriculum. We do a, wilderness experience, 6 days
Mm-hmm.
unplugged in the wilderness, et cetera. But the whole point of it is to really get people who are already great leaders, seasoned professionals, change makers in the room together and in relationship with each other so that they have
Yeah.
this support system with each other and they can take risks and challenge each other. And eventually, at the end of the experience, go out and make decisions differently as leaders with a whole new network to leverage and call upon. And I think
Yeah.
what I was excited about when I came to ALF was not only do we have this fellows program, but now I get to create almost from scratch the alumni programming, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
now we have 3 or 4 major events a year that the public can attend, courageous conversations we do, and there's affinity groups for our senior fellows to engage in, as well as some other offerings, power circles that we arrange for them to really connect deeply with a handful of senior fellows to help them problem solve. So it's,
Yeah.
again, because I like to create, right, it's been fun to
Yeah.
kind of be able to create these things from scratch.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's cool. I mean, so, American Leadership Forum, and when you hear people say, I think tangentially, like even though I was like around different circles and hear people say ALF, it always kind of had like this kind of mystique of like, what the heck is that?
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
and so that, which I've always kind of thought was, that's a little concerning, but it is an invitation or a nomination type organization, right? It's not like
Yeah.
I can't just go on the website and say I want to join up, right? It's
Correct. Except,
there's some vetting and what's the
yeah.
reason and the purpose and the process?
Yeah. No, I appreciate that question. And I think, it is a bit of a tension, right? Because
Hmm.
it is an exclusive experience. The fellows program is. It is
Yeah.
not for beginning leaders or middle management. It's definitely for people who have a significant sphere of influence. And
Hmm.
frankly, we've changed that definition over the years. I want
Yeah.
influencers, not necessarily people that have a big title and aren't going to do anything with what they've learned in the fellows program, right?
Right.
So I
Yeah.
think it's an interesting mix that we can pull in from labor leaders, religious leaders, private sector folks, et cetera. But And one of the things
Yeah.
like that, one of the
Yeah.
things that we have that we've tried to do over the last few years is how do we kind of share what we do and
Yeah.
what we know more broadly. So it's not just 25 people a year, because that's I think not effective. We can do better. And
Yeah.
so what we've done is certainly having these public events has helped. We also now have ALF Insights, which is a facilitation
Hmm.
service, basically, where people can call on us to facilitate conversations in an ALF style. And we have a Friends of ALF newsletter now, which is great because it's for people that, they're not interested or don't qualify or don't, whatever, have time to be in the fellows program, but they can still stay
Yeah.
in touch with our content and who we are and what we're up to. So,
Yeah. So that's the thing. So let's talk about it. I mean, like I said, I didn't really know exactly what it was, and then I was invited to come in. I come in, and quite honestly, I've had the incredible privilege to be a part of all kinds of different kind of leadership trainings and that kind of stuff. And quite honestly, this was the most impactful leadership kind of training, and I would even call it a leadership training.
right,
I don't,
right.
it really is a network, relationships, and so in that, what would you say? Because you mentioned even people going to have you come in and do the ALF style, and I kind of get that. But what is the American Leadership Forum style? Like, what would you say are the key? What's the key ingredients? What's the
Hmm.
secret sauce?
It's relationship based. Before we
Yeah.
problem solve, before we compare titles or LinkedIn profiles, I don't
Mm-hmm.
care. I
Mm-hmm.
want to know
Yeah.
you as a person. So, I mean, I think that's absolutely number one, respecting who we are as people and how we show up as humans, checking in with each other as people first. And then I would say, secondly, having dialogue as a style of communicating. So, dialogue would be, suspending judgment, over who we're in conversation with, doing deep listening, not showing up with your agenda only, but actually
Yeah.
uh, seeking to understand other people's opinions. So I think there's
Yeah.
certain kind of tools that we weave in to an ALF type facilitation or experience. Um, it's interesting. I'm reading Marianne Williamson's book called The Politics of Love, and I just can't put it
Hmm.
down because there's so much about it that I think reflects ALF values and style. And
Mm-hmm.
regardless of your politics, right? Doesn't matter. It's that
Yeah.
we care about each other as people first. And I think we have to have a revolution of kindness, in this country,
Yeah.
given where we are and where we can actually hear each other, put down our pencils and our weapons and
Yeah.
our Twitter pages, and
Yeah.
just be
Yeah.
with each other. And so I think that is what makes ALF unique, and
Yeah.
the fact that you're not going to join a class or be a part of a circle that's a choir. We want people with different experiences and perspectives in the room. So, how
Yeah.
cool is it in my job that I get to go camping every summer, as a part of the fellows experience with, like, this summer it was the Bishop
Yeah.
Oscar
Wow.
Cantu, and with private sector folks, with, the head of the building and trades union. And he said
Yeah.
mass on the beach at Gold Lake, and like half his class came, and they're not Catholic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That to me is
Yeah.
like, yeah, let's experience each other's worlds. To me, that is beautiful. And that's how we
Yeah.
show up as our best and highest selves, is unselfishly suspending judgment and just being with each other.
Yeah, that's the thing that I really, really appreciate about it. That it was, it is so focused on just relationships. Like, let's just get to know people. I remember even it was like, I don't know, how many weeks you were restricted to talk about your work, right?
Right.
It was just
Yeah.
about yourself, your person, and then that just gives you such a great connection with other people. And um, yeah, and I think it's really powerful because then it gives you the space to have kind of true dialogue because you're having trust and respect. And then those other people and their other opinions, you're not so much ready to make a snap judgment or prepare what you're going to say, and you're like, active listening. And
Right.
yeah, it was great.
The other thread that has just deepened um, and accelerated, I think, over the last couple of years in the fellows program is the conversation about race, equity, and difference and
Yeah.
belonging.
Mm.
I'll never ever forget the class of 2020, ALF's class of 2020,
Yeah.
because,
The COVID class. Yeah.
the COVID class, because not only did we all have to pivot, right, and go online and whatever, we had to make a lot of choices, and there was disappointment and grieving and experience that they thought they were going to get.
Yeah.
There are all sorts of lessons for me as a leader in there, and for all of us, really. And now
Yeah.
this class couldn't be closer, frankly. They're so
Hmm.
tight. But I think it's because of what they had to endure together. And,
Sure.
I think because of everything that happened this year, ALF kind of backed off in terms of what our curriculum and agenda was, and let what we were all experiencing
Hmm.
be the curriculum, be the dialogue. And every time this class met, it was, the day after, the week of George Floyd's murder, and then the fires,
Yeah.
and we couldn't go outside. And then it was the insurrection. I mean, I'm not kidding. It was like one thing after
Yeah.
another with this class.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful demonstration of people who politically may not agree, or people who have very different bank accounts,
Yeah.
very different life paths, but who started to be able to be in each other's shoes. And because of that, because their relationships are based in love, and they could hear each other and really hear each other in terms of different experiences in life as African American people, or as women, or
Yeah.
poor people growing up. Oh my, literally, they're
Yeah.
leaving this experience making decisions differently professionally. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's the goal, is that we have a broader lens, right? We can see and feel more as senior fellows, and so we make decisions differently,
Yeah.
really keeping equity and the common good in the forefront.
What I found it really valuable too is like you're making that connection with your own individual group, but then there's the wider network of people who've kind of all said, "Hey, I'm in this to help other people," right? Which
Right.
I think is a different type of so much of leadership, it's how do you accomplish your goals? Rather with this, it's like how much do we help each other all improve and do good, right?
That's
Which is
right.
different, yeah, which is a different style. What's something for you? Oh, go ahead. You had something you were going to say.
Our classmate, Jackie Morales' friend, who is the director of housing for the city of San Jose, I think said it beautifully when she was having a difficult conversation with another senior fellow who she
That's
happened to
right.
work with. And,
Yeah.
he actually said, "We're both senior fellows. We should be able to figure this out." And she
Yeah.
realized and said, this gives us a fast forward card with each other, because like we have this
Yeah.
shared experience. And you don't have to be an ALF fellow to
Yeah.
commit, right, to showing up differently in meetings, in work, and to have equity being a guiding light.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's like the fellows experience is special, but how about we all work on our own humanity, right,
Yeah.
with what
It's
we
kind of,
read and how we show up.
it is kind of funny because it's like, why do we really need to have these type of things for everyone just to be adults and care
Yeah,
for
right.
each other? Yeah.
Yeah, right.
It
Yeah,
is amazing. But you go through, you're progressing in your career and you start to get this kind of thing like, well, I have to succeed. And for me to succeed, these others have to fail. And I think that just
right.
makes us, as we get older, so closed off to anybody who's other or different. And I think that, like what you're doing just with ALF is to bring these relationships together just really helps the community. So tell us some of those things that have happened, like even
Mm.
and that's a great anecdote with Jackie, and I remember hearing about that. But what's some other things that you've seen because of relationships and transforming the person, and it's transforming them in the space? What's some of the things you've seen in the even the quote unquote projects or
Hmm.
initiatives that have come out of ALF being in San Jose?
Well, it's interesting because sometimes I can spot them just by looking at people's boards or hearing how people talk publicly.
Hmm.
I'm like, oh, I
Hmm.
know where that comes from, right? Or I know those two
Sure.
know each other because, but I think, tangibly, there's one story I'll share a little confidentially though, but I think it just hits home.
Well,
And that
this is public, so I don't know
I'm
how
not gonna I'm
confidential.
not gonna say any names. Let's just put
Okay,
it that
just good.
way.
That just
No names.
yeah, just yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I it's just a beautiful example to me where, we had someone who in class, African American man, who shared um, stories of racism and the history of racism. And by the end of his sharing and the session, a special 2-hour session we had that followed actually, George Floyd's murder, and the class was really processing this. A private sector person on the call said out loud, "This is going to change the way I hire forever." And I'll never
Wow.
forget that. And it's as
Yeah.
simple as being able to be open and hearing and creating the conditions where people of color can feel comfortable and feel like whatever they share is going to be we're going to act on it as people of privilege. It's not
Mm-hmm.
going to be shared for our own education and that's it. It's going to be shared,
Yeah.
and I commit as a person with privilege to do something with it and
Yeah.
about it. And so that to
Yeah.
me was huge. I think the other thing that I see, and we actually got data to back this up, is 50% of senior fellows who responded to our survey last year, 50% of those folks joined the boards of their classmates. And
Oh,
why this
awesome.
is a big deal,
Yeah.
is because when you look at the 2016 Open Impact Report, the Giving Code, 90% of
Mm-hmm.
cash philanthropy leaves the region. Private
Yeah.
sector nonprofits aren't talking to each other, aren't speaking the same languages. So to me, I mean, ALF is the antidote to that. I mean, plain and simple. If I could scale the fellows program, how do
Yeah.
we get
Yeah.
people in relationship with each other? So in one
Yeah.
nonprofit executive I was talking to, I said, "So what happened as a result of and I just had this conversation last week. I said, "What happened as a result of your experience?" And she said, "Well, this person from a foundation joined my board. Now he's a major
Mm.
donor. And then he connected us to so and so." And
Yeah.
then, I mean, the ripple
Yeah.
effect is huge of those relationships. So,
Yeah.
from First Act Silicon Valley, right, which was created through ALF relationships, to people changing how they hire, how they vote, and how they show up and make decisions.
Yeah.
It's a tremendous ripple effect that admittedly is hard for me to put down and measure in a
Sure.
report, right? Because
Right.
sometimes these transformations are very personal.
Yeah.
But it is fun for me to kind of see, and for our board to kind of be a witness uh, to how ALF has really uh, changed
Made it.
Silicon
Yeah.
Valley for the better.
Yeah. Wasn't that even the original kind of for like the founder of ALF back in the day? I forget the name of the person that you were mentioning,
Jaworski,
but
yeah,
yeah.
right.
Well, it was kind of the idea of like create change in people that'll affect like you. Let's change the way that we're doing leadership, and then that'll. I don't want to say trickle down
Yes.
gets too Ronald Reagan, but you know, but
Ripple
that
out.
will be ripple out. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Let's use the butterfly wings instead. Yeah,
yeah.
right. So, I mean, that was kind of like the idea. Like, so even in San Jose, to help this community be stronger, it's like let's network the people and uh, build quality and humility and relationships in those people making decisions. And right,
Yes.
that's yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think, and
yeah,
again, I can't stress enough understanding different paths.
yeah, yeah.
It's one of the exercises we do in the fellows program is called the 7-minute story. And this is
Mm-hmm.
something any group could do, right? That
Yeah,
wants to
yeah,
build those trusted relationships. And it's really, an exercise where you share the most impactful, the moments, the things that made you as a person,
yeah,
right? The trauma, the wins, the anything, the people that really made you. And when we do that in like this double confidentiality setting as a class, uh,
yeah,
your opinions of people change, your judgment, your perception of people
yeah,
just drops, because we all have our stuff. We all have a
yeah,
past. We've all had our challenges, and it creates this shared humanity upon which, further relationships and eventually collaboration and things build, right, can be built upon.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
so,
once you
yeah.
know someone's kind of almost like their backstory, it gives context, I think. I mean, we should always be approaching people with grace and mercy and kindness. But once you do get a little bit of their backstory, it makes you, it gives you, it breaks down your own, I don't know,
Oh yeah,
prejudice. I even think
completely
just in
bias.
thinking, yeah, right, the bias. I even think about like with, having my dad finally say like, oh yeah, unless we were, misbehaving, we never felt like we had our dad's attention. and
Mm,
then seeing his life and then him doing a lot of things that were just misbehaving, it made sense. It's like, oh, that's where he, you know
exactly.
what I mean? And that gave me context to kind of like, I don't know, to be in relationship with him. Like, oh, okay, well, this makes sense now, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. Um, so, one of the things I would think is the diversity aspect. How do you, because if you're talking about people that are being invited and who are in the program, the majority of them, at least historically, um, are going to be the people who've had the privilege and the opportunity to become into those leadership opportunities, right? And those positions. How are you as ALF helping, that diversity be across? Well, I know you do guys do a great job at bringing different sectors. There's
Hmm.
nonprofit, there's a lot of different things. But how are you managing that? Because there might be someone who is not as privileged, um, who has leadership skill, but not in that position because they haven't really had opportunity. Well, how are you
Right.
going about that?
That's a great, great question. And I think part of that is in the vetting that we do of the fellows. I mean, fortunately, it's not just me, right? If there's a team
Yeah.
here of network development committee of senior
Mm-hmm.
fellows who are doing the vetting and examining. And I think, even through the 5 years I've been here, I mean, one of the shifts that we've made is let's stop paying so much attention to titles, right? Let's
Yeah.
make sure that
Yeah.
we have the right influencers in the room. To me, that's
Mm-hmm.
that's the most important thing. We want to, because we're making a great investment in somebody, right? That we want them to actually take what they've learned in the transformation they've had and apply it as big and as broad as possible.
Yeah.
So I think we've gotten better. I don't think we're quite there, as far as I'd like to see us, but ALF basically funds $100,000 a year in scholarships, right? So 10
Mm-hmm.
fellows out of the 25 ish
Mm-hmm.
have the majority of their tuition paid for. And it's for this reason, right? We don't
Yeah.
want a
Yeah.
bunch of people, like I said, that have the same background, same checking account, same privilege in the
Yeah.
room.
Yeah.
You want that mix. And the fellows want it too, right? You don't need to be
Yeah.
I remember this one woman said to me, I don't need to be in the room with a bunch of other tech people. I do that all day.
Right.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. She goes, I want to be in the room with like a mayor or a nonprofit leader and
Yeah.
so we try and make it possible both through scholarships, through I think some creative um, seeking out of voices and experiences that aren't necessarily being always nominated, right?
Yeah.
But we made ALF made a commitment over the past, I think, year and a half, and it's a commitment we've made since I started here, which was we've got to really diversify in many ways who's coming
Mm-hmm.
in the room and who's getting invited. And
Yeah.
the commitment we made in the last year and a half is really, let's be sure that the balance in the class, the ethnic balance, really reflects, the demographics reflect the community we're serving. And so we
Yeah.
have 60% people of color in the class. We have a good mix of public and nonprofit represented.
Yeah.
And through, by getting nonprofit leaders coming forward and nominating a variety of folks, they share experiences that would not
Mm-hmm.
otherwise have been in the room. And frankly, I
Yeah.
mean, we're all people, right, Daniel? And so when you sit down and
Yeah.
you start hearing people's stories, I don't care what sector they're from,
Yeah.
you've got the lawyer at the tech company who was homeless as a kid, I mean, so you
Yeah.
start to hear these stories that really build
Yeah.
empathy, and
Yeah.
so kind of answers your question. I think, there have been many folks who have said to me, why isn't there an ALF like, for budding leaders or that? And
Sure.
I think that's a great idea. I don't have capacity to do that right now, but what the fellows program is really for and established for are people that have a significant sphere of influence that we want to apply it broadly when they leave the fellows
Yeah.
program.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. What's something that has surprised you? Uh, let's do both sides of the coin that have surprised you in working with so many different leaders and influencers. What's some of the that's super encouraging and surprising, and then something that's like, oh darn.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. I think what has surprised and encouraged me is that we all want we all want to find a way to have an equitable and thriving Silicon Valley. It's the how
Hmm.
we get there and what our
Hmm.
base knowledge of why problems exist that
Hmm.
that we don't share yet. The how and what how we got here and how do we fix it we don't share. But I think
Hmm.
in talking and having some confidential conversations with people, in particular when shelter in place happened and there was sort of a surge of giving because people recognize like, oh my God, this is a massive crisis that we're seeing and it's going to get worse. We have to react now. I mean, having
Yeah.
conversations with folks who are senior fellows about, what can I do? Where do I even begin to help this problem? I hear love and empathy and compassion. And to me, that's an incredible starting point to problem solve. What is
Yeah.
discouraging is when people leave the table too early.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
kind of check the box that I gave last year, or I was involved in this last year, I've moved on.
Hmm.
Creating an equitable and thriving valley is not something that happens with one check and one
Right.
crisis, right? A
Yeah.
response to one crisis. We need
Yeah.
to be willing to sit at the table and dig and learn and not assume that because we are wealthy experts have some experience that we know the answers, but instead
Hmm.
get voices and people around the table for our own learning and education that are outside of our bubble and that aren't the usual suspects and dig and ask
Hmm.
questions and be curious.
Yeah.
That's an investment. That's an
Yeah.
investment. And I think this valley and our residents are worth it. And we need to stick with it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Now, for you being a leader, and having a very influential career, CEOs of different companies, starting different things, and as a parent and a partner and musician, all these kind of things. How does Suzanne stay grounded, mindful, and thinking in terms of like being present and having compassion?
That is a great question. A few different things. I mean, I am a runner and I'm recent to that. Like
Mm.
I've only been running for the last 3.5, 4 years.
Mm.
And that's been a game changer for me. That
Mm.
has really been a game changer for me. And I think given me a new outlet. We do this
Yeah.
exercise with fellows where we have them put these, there's like a stack of cards, and each one has some sort of an action or some sort of a activity on it, like, problem solving or whatever. And you
Yeah.
have to put these in piles of this brings me joy or this does not.
Yeah.
And then you have to narrow it down to the 5 things that bring you joy. And it was surprising to me that one of my top 5 was
Hmm.
moving physically.
Yeah, I
So
could see that.
yeah, and I mean, duh, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so
I think anybody from the outside would be like, "Yeah, Suzanne, she can't sit
she
still. Yeah, she's
stood
on the
still,
move."
right? Right,
Yeah. Yeah.
always. So, but so that has definitely been a big deal for me. I think
Yeah.
practicing some meditation, I do not do it every day. I do
Hmm.
it sporadically, but that keeps me grounded. And then the big one though, I would say is journaling.
Hmm.
Journaling for me is what, and reading, I got my kind of go-to books, and I have a spiritual practice. I have a community that I am close with and that keeps me
Hmm.
grounded. So I have a
Yeah.
toolkit, as we all hopefully do, of our go-to practices and things that kind of keep us steady and centered. And
Yeah.
there's times I'm really good about dipping into the toolkit and practicing, and there's other
Sure.
times where I start to feel depleted and I have to go back to it. But one of my
Yeah.
favorite books is by it's funny, my dad had like every self-help book, you know, in the 70s that you could possibly get your hands on. And
Hmm.
Wayne Dyer is a big author back then.
Hmm.
And he has a book called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Mind. I think is what it is. Change
Hmm.
Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. Yeah. Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. That is like my go-to. I don't know. I just open that up anywhere and it resets me. So
Yeah.
I have
Cool.
to work on that though. I have to work on
Yeah.
that
Sure.
because as Jaworski said to me, actually, I had a meeting with him a few months ago when COVID was starting, and I said, "Oh my God, how are we going to do this? How are we going to
Yeah.
facilitate?"
Yeah.
And he goes, "Suzanne, the success of the fellows program is entirely," he said something dramatic, like, "is entirely dependent on your interior condition."
Oh.
Meaning, I need to take care of myself. because
Yeah.
when I walk in a room, we all know this as leaders, right? Our energy, our intention, our context is felt
Yeah.
by others, even if, subconsciously it is felt by others. So how are you going to walk in the room today? You know?
Yeah.
So ALF has forced me to kind of up my game, right? As a
Sure.
human and as a leader. This is not a job I phone in. I can't phone it in.
Right.
I
You got to
have to
live it. Yeah.
be, I got to live it. I got to be authentically, in the zone and living my highest calling, or showing up and just being completely authentic with where I'm at.
Yeah.
This week's been very difficult in that we lost one of our family members here at ALF. Greg Randstrom was a facilitator of our fellows program for 15 years, and
Hmm.
2 years ago was diagnosed with ALS, and he passed away a few days ago as
Oh,
we're taping this.
yeah.
I have to be honest. His voice and his teachings have been with me big time over the last couple of years,
Hmm.
and so I'm blessed to have had examples of people that were able to center themselves and live their highest and best calling to inspire me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Well, sorry about I didn't know about his passing. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah. It's been quite
all
a
right.
couple of years,
Yeah.
right?
Then how about for you on the personal level? What with this last couple of years, what do you think that even with your personal life as well as your
Mhm.
professional life, what's something that you have been that challenged on and that you felt like you've grown or learned in this last COVID season?
Mm, it's a great question. I would have to say that the last couple of years have really forced me to, I wouldn't say forced even. I would say it has given me some space to dive deep into my
Hmm.
own understanding, learning, and how I show up around racial equity and justice,
Yeah.
and how I use my privilege in the spaces that I find myself in, right, as a white woman, as a leader. And so I've been challenged, I've been stretched, I've been criticized. I've been on this whole kind of intense
Hmm.
wrestling with this issue and how I express myself around it and how I lead at ALF for our organization and our fellows to have conversations in this
Hmm.
space. And I guess where I've come to, Daniel, is that I will be vocal. I will use my voice. I will question. I will raise issues and call out things I see. And
Hmm.
even if I do it clumsily as a white leader, that's okay.
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm willing to learn and I'm willing to be criticized, and because it is the right thing to do. So
Yeah.
that's something personally I've really been wrestling with. I think the other
Yeah.
thing, and I'm glad, and I continue to wrestle, and I will continue. I'm not going anywhere when it comes to this journey and my learning. I
Sure.
think it's lifelong. And the other thing is just the lessons my daughters have taught me. I've got a 14
Hmm.
and 17-year-old, both with ADD. My older one has ADHD, and they've had to do, school at home on a computer and just
Yeah.
go through these massive disruptions in their
Yeah.
education and their life. And they have just inspired the hell out of me. And
Hmm.
my older daughter got a job. She's getting yelled at by customers because she has to check their vaccine cards, and
Right.
the
Yeah.
whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's like they're just so adaptable, and they give me hope. They give me hope,
Yeah.
their spunk and their spirit. So I think that, I think I've become a better parent over the last 5 years because I have had to really focus on my own health centering and mindfulness. And that has
Yeah.
had a ripple effect with my relationship and with my kids. So I'm both
Yeah.
reflective around that and very grateful.
Awesome. Yeah. That's cool. I mean, even kind of back in the beginning, it's like what you're saying is like the challenges, give us that opportunity to grow. So I think for most of us this last year, and, I know that you've faced different
Totally.
challenges throughout your life, and we all do. And those are the opportunities to grow. So, yeah. Awesome. Well, Suzanne, we got to land the plane. I could talk to you
Sure.
forever. I
I know,
really
right?
appreciate I really appreciate just your energy. I mean, I've always admired your, you're an interesting person because you have kind of like a boldness in a way, like a very, I don't want to say like a very strong presence, and yet at the same time, especially with what you're doing with ALF, it's a very kind of open, like you're saying, to humble kind of leadership style that you have. That's really awesome, and I'm glad that I know you.
Oh gosh, Daniel, back at you.
Yeah,
I'm glad I know you too.
Yeah, awesome.
Great conversation.
And keep up the good work and everything, and say hi to Jenny and all the office. And hopefully we'll see you, out and about somewhere sometime.
No doubt.
With a mask on, maybe without a mask. Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks a million. Good luck to you. Take care.
To find out more about American Leadership Forum Silicon Valley, go to their website, alfsv.org. Thank you for listening to the Content Magazine podcast. Follow us on social media at Content Mag. Visit our website to become a member and help us to continue to tell the stories of the local creatives. This episode's music is 408 by Jack Pavlina. Find out more about Jack on his Instagram at Jack Pavlina Music.